Now, let us turn our attention to the Islamic experience. The 18th century saw the great Muslim empires, mainly the Ottoman, the Safavid, and the Mughal, threatened and even weakened by military, political, and economic imperialist expansion of the West. The Muslim world found itself moving from a position of global power to a rather defensive position. In India, for example, the Mughal Empire went from a position of preeminence to decline due in part to internal problems. The decline of the Muslim empires was due to several factors. Internal problems did play an important role. However, the circumnavigation of the globe by the Europeans made it no longer necessary to transit the Islamic lands to move between Europe and Asia. Thus, this shift in trade routes had a detrimental economic effect on the Muslim lands that had benefited commercially from these trade routes for over 1,000 years. From the late 1700s until World War II, Western governments such as the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the German, and the Italian extracted forced agreements from many indigenous Muslim governments. These agreements gave commercial concessions, protections, and extraterritorial legal status to European merchants. Originally, both European merchants and Muslim rulers and merchants profited from this type of arrangement. But eventually, these agreements provided Western powers with the excuse, or we should say pretext, for direct intervention in the affairs of many Muslim countries. In addition, the Ottoman and Mughal empires suffered from internal problems, mainly disunity, which made it easier for European powers to influence and eventually exercise control of their lands. In light of this situation, Muslim scholars had to ask themselves several questions. The main question was whether European secularism and Western technological advances were transferable to Muslim societies. In terms of responses, there were three types of responses to the foreign encroachment on Muslim lands. These were, number one, the emulation, or should we say copying or imitating of Western ideas and institutions. Two, an attempt or efforts to combine Western ideas and innovations with traditional Islamic institutions and values. And finally, there was a total rejection of everything, anything and everything Western. Now, let us look at some examples of emulation of the West. This response was exemplified by the Ottoman Viceroy Muhammad Ali. He was the Viceroy or Pasha of Egypt from 1805 to 1849. He introduced machinery to the agricultural sector of the economy, and he also introduced European education and culture in the government schools and brought European advisors in an attempt to westernize the military. Nevertheless, he failed to make Egypt a powerful European-style nation. There were also several Ottoman sultans who tried to copy the Western experience. Among them was Selim III, Mahmud II. Selim III, for example, who ruled from 1762 to 1808, his efforts was mainly in the military sphere. He brought officers to train a new military in order to replace the traditional janissary. The most extreme example, however, of emulating the West was the creation of the Turkish Republic after World War I. This was the brainchild of Mustafa Ataturk. This was a radical attempt. His movement was known as Kemalism, which was based on the principles of reformism, nationalism, republicanism, statism, and most of all, secularism, meaning the separation of church, or should we say mosque, and state. Kemalism included some of the following innovations: the introduction of a European-style code of civil law, the abolition of the Arabic script, which was replaced with the Latin script, the abolition of the adhan, or call to prayer in Arabic, and the abolition of Islamic attire in the government sector and institution of higher learning. Ataturk's so-called reform to modernize was an attempt mainly to secularize an entire Muslim society. Let us take a look at an example of the so-called modernism. Obviously, this is clearly in contradiction to Islamic values and traditions as expressed in the main sources of Islam.